When I look at the moments in my life where I felt stuck, trapped, or held back, I used to think it was because of something someone did to me, something someone said, some door that stayed locked. I think some opportunity that never came. I used to think the barrier was out there somewhere in the hands of people who had more power, more influence, more control than I did. But over time, God began pulling back the layers, exposing the truths I didn't want to confront, and I started realizing the real barrier wasn't built by them, it was built by me. There comes a moment in every person's life when God will confront you with yourself. Not the version you show to others, not the version you pretend to be okay with, but the version you hide even from yourself. The hurt version, the fearful version, the overthinking version, the version that has learned how to smile while drowning. And when he places that mirror in front of you, you don't just see a reflection, you see a revelation that the most unmovable walls aren't made of stone, they're made of stories. The stories we keep telling ourselves about why we can't, why we shouldn't, why we won't ever become more than what we've been. And I know somebody watching this today has been blaming the external barrier for far too long. You've been blaming the lack of support, the closed doors, the people who left, the childhood trauma, the family dysfunction, the relationship that broke you, and the mistakes that marked you. But if we're going to break the barrier, we've got to be honest. Those things may have shaped you, but they didn't finish you. They may have wounded you, but they didn't define you. The truth is, the barrier that's hardest to face is the one built inside your own mind. I remember seasons where God wasn't waiting on the world to change around me. He was waiting on me to change how I saw myself. I kept asking him to fix situations, remove people, open doors, shift atmospheres, but God kept shifting the conversation back to me. Because what good is an open door if you don't believe you're worthy to walk through it? What good is a blessing if you're too insecure to receive it? What good is a new season if your old mindset keeps dragging you back into bondage? For some of us, the barrier is a voice that sounds like fear. That fear says, you're going to fail just like last time. It whispers, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? Sit back down. And because that voice lives inside us, we've convinced ourselves it must be the truth. But the enemy doesn't need to take over your life if he can take over your thoughts. For others, the barrier looks like old pain. Pain that has been carried so long it starts to feel like identity. You start saying things like, that's just how I am, not because it's how you truly are, but because it's the version of you that survived the storm, and surviving became so normal that you forgot you were also called to thrive. You forgot that God didn't just create you strong enough to make it through. He created you powerful enough to rise from it. Some of us are living behind barriers built by shame. Shame that says if anyone knew the real you, they would walk away. Shame that keeps you edited, filtered, and hidden. Shame that keeps you shrinking so you don't disrupt the comfort of people who benefited from your brokenness. Shame that convinces you healing is too far, change is too late, freedom is too expensive. But God is not intimidated by the parts of you that you're scared to face. He knows every mistake, every secret, every tear, every fear, and he still calls you chosen. There's also the barrier of comparison. You see others running in their lane, thriving in their purpose, and instead of being inspired, you're overwhelmed. You start measuring your value against their victories, forgetting that God didn't create you to be a clone of someone else. He created you to be a revelation of him. But comparison convinces you that you're behind, when in reality you're in process. So many of us are trapped in a cycle of almost. You almost started the business. You are almost healed. You almost forgave. You almost believed. But almost is a barrier disguised as progress. It gives you the illusion of movement without the responsibility of commitment. And the enemy loves it when you almost step into purpose, because almost stepping still keeps you stuck. Sometimes the barrier is a vow you didn't even realize you made. A silent vow like, I'll never trust again. I'll never let anyone get close. I'll never put myself out there. I'll never love again. I'll never try again. These vows feel like protection, but they're actually prisons. They block out hurt, yes, but they also block out healing. They block out betrayal, but they also block out breakthrough. When you build a wall to keep the world from hurting you, you also build a wall that keeps God from transforming you. And if you're listening to this right now, I want you to lean in, because God is not confronting your barrier to shame you. He's confronting it to free you. He's revealing what's inside because He has something waiting for you outside. But He can't take you into the new if you're still loyal to the old. He can't elevate the version of you that refuses to evolve. He can't bless the version of you that won't let go of broken survival strategies. I want you to think about this. What if the thing you're praying for is already prepared, already positioned, already available, but God is waiting for you to see yourself differently? What if the only thing standing between you and the next dimension is the story you've been telling yourself? The story that says you're too damaged, too late, too unqualified, too flawed, too inconsistent, too scared. What if the truth is that you're none of those things? You're just carrying outdated information about yourself. There is a version of you that you haven't met yet, a version of you that knows how to steward authority, a version that carries peace like a mantle, a version that trusts God without hesitation, a version that doesn't shrink, a version that doesn't settle, a version that doesn't apologize for answering God's call. But you'll never meet that version as long as you keep bowing to the barrier. And the barrier doesn't break by force, it breaks by revelation. The moment you recognize that the wall you thought was unbreakable is actually movable. The moment you realize the thing you feared was only powerful because you kept feeding it. The moment you understand that every limitation inside you is subject to the God who lives within you. You don't need permission to grow. You don't need applause to begin. You don't need validation to change. You don't need agreement to evolve. The only thing you need is the courage to confront the story that has been narrating your life, because once you confront it, you can rewrite it, and once you rewrite it, you can rise above it. And when you rise above it, the barrier loses its assignment. God is calling you into a season where you don't run from yourself anymore. A season where you stop treating your wounds like permanent property. A season where you stop giving your fears the authority that belongs to your faith. A season where you refuse to let internal barriers keep you from external blessings. A season where you dare to believe that who you are becoming is greater than who you've been. There are seasons in your life that feel like they are designed to break you. Seasons where the air feels heavy, the days feel long, and your heart feels like it's carrying more weight than it was ever built to hold. Seasons where you wake up and wonder, God, is this what my life has come to? Is this the chapter where everything falls apart? And I know someone listening to this has been trying to make sense of why everything seems to be collapsing at once, why friendships are slipping, why opportunities dried up, but why the joy you used to easily find now feels like a memory you can't reach. You're standing in the darkest part of the tunnel and nothing in you feels strong enough to keep walking. But let me tell you something that I had to learn in my own breaking seasons. Just because a moment feels dark doesn't mean it's demonic. Sometimes the darkness is not the presence of evil, but the absence of distraction. Sometimes God brings you into a breaking point season because there are parts of you He cannot reach while everything around you is loud. And when God wants to reveal the deepest, strongest, most powerful version of you, He will often take you into the shadows so He can speak where only you can hear Him. Breaking point seasons are the places where everything unnecessary falls away. You don't get to keep pretending. You don't get to keep running. You don't get to hide behind the identity you built to survive. These seasons strip you. They peel back the layers. They bring your wounds, your insecurities, your fears, your longings into the light. And I know it doesn't feel like a blessing when you're in it. It feels like punishment. It feels like abandonment. It feels like God forgot your address. But breaking point seasons are often the moments where heaven is closest. God is not trying to destroy you. He is trying to expose what has been destroying you. That's why the pressure increases. That's why the people you depended on suddenly fall silent. That's why the patterns you used to rely on no longer work. God is making sure you cannot go back to who you were before this moment, because who you were was too small for where He's taking you next. There is a kind of strength that you can only find when you have nothing left to hold on to, and some of us never discover that strength until everything else collapses. We never discover the power we carry until the life we built starts breaking apart. We never discover the voice inside us until the voices around us go quiet. You cannot birth something powerful without experiencing a season that feels like it's tearing you open. There were moments in my life where I thought the darkness was proof that God had abandoned me. But what I didn't realize was that God sometimes turns the lights off to help you see what you could never notice in the brightness. When everything is going right, you get distracted. Your attention gets divided. But when everything is falling down, suddenly you start reaching for God with a desperation you didn't have before. Darkness has a way of sharpening your spiritual senses. If you're in one of those seasons right now, I want you to hear me. This season is not evidence of your weakness. It is evidence of your becoming. You are being stretched, not shattered. You are being refined, not rejected. You are being molded, not minimized. And I know it's painful, but nothing powerful is born without pressure. Diamonds don't form in comfort. Oil doesn't come without crushing. Glory doesn't rise without fire. Breaking point seasons will confront you with the version of yourself you didn't want to meet. The version that struggles with trust. The version that questions God. The version that second guesses every decision. The version that wonders if you even deserve the life you've been praying for. But God is not exposing these parts to shame you. He is exposing them so they can no longer sabotage you. He is bringing every hidden insecurity to the surface so it loses its grip. There are lessons that only darkness can teach. Lessons about resilience. Lessons about faith. Lessons about identity. Lessons about surrender. Lessons about the difference between control and calling. Lessons about the parts of you that you've been carrying that were never meant to go into the next season. Sometimes God lets the breaking happen because the version of you that existed before was carrying too much weight from a world He's trying to deliver you from. Breaking point seasons are also where God reveals what's been holding you back that you didn't even realize you were holding on to. Some of us have been praying for breakthrough while holding on to bondage. We're asking God to elevate us while we're gripping fear with both hands. We're asking Him to open doors while clinging to old pain. And God can't put new power into hands that refuse to let go of what was. So He lets the season feel dark. He strips the comfort. He removes the illusions. He shakes what you were leaning on until you're forced to lean on Him. Because the strength God is trying to birth in you cannot be built on anything unstable. He needs you anchored. He needs you rooted. He needs you grounded in truth, not emotion, not memory, not insecurity. Do you know what else breaking point seasons do? They activate revelation. They activate clarity. They activate identity. They activate courage you didn't even know you had. There is something about hitting the bottom that makes you stop caring about who misunderstood you, who left you, who doubted you. When you're broken, you become honest. And when you become honest, you become dangerous. Because nothing is more powerful than a person who has nothing left to hide. I know it feels dark, but darkness is where seeds grow. Darkness is where God shapes the unseen parts of you. Darkness is where roots strengthen. Darkness is where the soil of your soul gets prepared for the very thing you've been praying for. God is not punishing you with this season. He is positioning you. You're in the place where what's been buried in you is about to start breaking through. Pain has a purpose when God is in it. Confusion has direction when God is guiding it. Silence has meaning when God is the one controlling it. You may not understand why everything is shaking, but God does His best work when you feel like you're at the end of yourself. Because it's only when you reach the end of you that you finally make room for Him to take over. Breaking point seasons are not the end of your story. They are the beginning of your revelation. The moment you realize you didn't lose your strength, you just hadn't discovered it yet. The moment you understand that the darkness didn't come to destroy you, it came to develop you. The moment you see that what looked like the lowest point was actually the birthing place of the highest version of who God created you to be, there comes a moment in your life when you realize that the things that wounded you were never meant to be wasted. The pain that broke you, the betrayal that stunned you, the mistakes that embarrassed you, the seasons that almost swallowed you whole, every wound you carry has the potential to become a weapon of wisdom in your hands. But you cannot see that when you're still bleeding. You cannot see that when the hurt is still fresh, when the memory still burns, when the disappointment is still sitting on your chest like an unwelcome visitor who refuses to leave. There was a time in my life when I asked God, why did you let that happen? Why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you protect me from this pain? And what I didn't understand back then is that God doesn't waste anything. Not your tears, not your setbacks, not your heartbreak, not even the choices you wish you could rewrite. He gathers it all, and instead of discarding it, he transforms it. Because in the kingdom, wounds are not signs of weakness, they are sources of wisdom. But here's the truth many of us don't want to face. Transformation begins when you stop hiding the wound. Some of us have gotten so good at pretending to be okay that we've forgotten what real healing even feels like. We've learned to numb instead of nurture. We've learned to bury instead of bring it to God. We've learned to keep the wound covered, thinking that if no one sees it, it doesn't exist. But covered wounds don't heal. Covered wounds become infected. Covered wounds create cycles. Covered wounds make you mistrust blessings because you're still grieving what broke you. God cannot heal what you keep hiding, and he cannot turn a wound into wisdom if you keep pretending it never happened. There is a version of strength that the world applauds, the kind that looks polished, confident, and unbothered. But there is another kind of strength that heaven recognizes. It is the strength of someone who says, I may be hurt, but I'm still here. I may be bleeding, but I'm still believing. I may be broken, but I'm still becoming. And that kind of strength is born out of wounds that you allow God to touch. Every time you survive something that should have taken you out, something was deposited inside you. Every betrayal taught you a boundary. Every heartbreak taught you discernment. Every disappointment taught you endurance. Every closed door taught you direction. Every mistake taught you humility. The enemy hoped those wounds would kill you, but God knew those wounds would teach you how to fight differently. Some of you have been walking around thinking your story disqualifies you, but what if it's actually what qualifies you? What if the very thing you're ashamed of is the very thing God wants to use as evidence of his power in your life? What if your most painful chapters are the pages someone else needs to read so they know they're not alone? We live in a world that teaches you to present the highlight reel, to show the healed version, the finished version, the victorious version. But the healed you did not teach you how to survive. The whole you did not teach you how to pray. The confident you did not teach you how to lean on God. It was the wounded you. The version of you that cried, questioned, struggled, doubted, fell apart, got back up and tried again anyway. Oftentimes, the greatest wisdom is birthed in places that once felt like defeat. You don't learn compassion from comfort. You don't learn strength from success. You don't learn authority from applause. You learn these things from breaking and rebuilding. You learn them from the places where you didn't think you would make it. Some of us are afraid to revisit our wounds because we think going back will destroy us. But revisiting is not reliving. Revisiting is reclaiming. Revisiting is looking at the wound again, but this time with eyes that have seen God's faithfulness. This time with a heart that survived the heartbreak, but this time with a spirit that knows you're not who you used to be. When you go back with revelation, you don't break, you rise. Let me tell you something. The enemy isn't afraid of your wound. He's afraid of what happens when you surrender that wound to God. Because wounds surrender turn into wisdom that exposes every lie the enemy tried to use against you. The enemy wanted you to believe you were unworthy, but the wound taught you your value. The enemy wanted you to live in fear, but the wound taught you courage. The enemy wanted the wound to isolate you, but God used it to elevate you. There is a version of you on the other side of healing that carries authority you didn't have before. Authority that doesn't come from your title, your education, your achievements, or your connections. It comes from the fact that you've been through something, you've survived something. You've walked through fire and came out with wisdom that cannot be shaken. When God heals your wound, He doesn't erase it, He transforms it. The scar remains not as a reminder of your pain, but as a reminder of your power. A reminder that you made it out. A reminder that what was meant to destroy you did not. A reminder that God's hand was on you even when you didn't see it. Some of you are living in shame because you think the wound discredits your calling. But in the kingdom, healed wounds are credentials. God uses the very thing you thought would disqualify you to qualify you to speak into the lives of others. People don't connect to perfection, they connect to authenticity. They connect to someone who knows what broken feels like but chose healing anyway. They connect to someone who has walked through their own valley and learned how to find God in it. The wisdom you gain from your wounds becomes a weapon against the version of you that used to settle, a weapon against the patterns that used to trap you, a weapon against the generational cycles that tried to repeat themselves in your life, a weapon against fear, doubt, insecurity, and every lie that told you your story was over. You don't realize it now, but you are carrying answers inside you, answers that were carved from pain, answers that were shaped by storms, answers that were revealed in moments where you thought you had nothing left to give. Those answers become guidance for someone else. They become direction for someone who was walking a road you've already traveled. Wounds turn into wisdom when you stop seeing them as punishment and start seeing them as preparation. God was preparing your voice. God was preparing your resilience. God was preparing your discernment. God was preparing your anointing. God was preparing your authority. And sometimes preparation looks like breaking. Your story is not over because you were wounded. Your story is evolving because you were wounded. And every time you rise, you prove that pain is not the end, it's the beginning of a wisdom that cannot be taken from you. There comes a point in your journey where you realize that the version of you that has survived up to this moment is not the version that will carry you into what God has prepared. You start to feel a stretch in your spirit, a pulling, a discomfort, like your soul knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. You feel like you're outgrowing conversations, outgrowing environments, outgrowing habits, outgrowing people, outgrowing versions of yourself that once felt familiar. And you don't even know how to explain it, but you can feel destiny knocking on doors you haven't even opened yet. Every time God is getting ready to elevate you, He creates a divine tension between who you were and who you're becoming. And that tension is not meant to confuse you, it's meant to awaken you. It's meant to show you that the calling on your life requires a version of you that you have not fully met yet. A version that is braver, wiser, healthier, more grounded, more aligned, more surrendered, more disciplined, more spiritually rooted than you've ever been before. But here's the part most people won't tell you. Meeting the next version of yourself feels like losing the current version of you. It feels like letting go of pieces of your identity that you've used as anchors. It feels like stepping out of comfort zones you built for protection. It feels like walking away from narratives you rehearsed for years. It feels like choosing growth over familiarity. And familiarity may be comforting, but comfort has never birthed calling. The next version of you will not be revealed in ease. She will not emerge in still waters. She will not rise in silence. She appears in the moments where you choose faith over fear, purpose over patterns, obedience over outcomes. She shows up when you say yes without knowing how. She steps forward when you release what God never asked you to carry. She rises when you stop negotiating with the old you and start embracing the new you. The version of you that God is calling forth is not intimidated by rooms you used to shrink in. She's not apologizing for the anointing on her life. She's not silencing her voice to make others comfortable. She's not pretending to be smaller than the assignment God gave her. She walks with authority not because she knows everything, but because she knows God is with her in everything. But if you're going to meet her, you have to confront the parts of you that have been resisting change, the part of you that still believes you're not enough, The part of you that thinks you're too broken, too flawed, too behind, too inconsistent, too damaged to evolve. The part of you that clings to old habits because new habits require responsibility. The part of you that stays loyal to old wounds because healing feels unfamiliar. The part of you that wants the promise but fears the process. You cannot meet the next version of you while protecting the limitations of the old you. God will often allow a disruption in your life to push you toward the version of yourself you are meant to become. He will remove certain relationships that kept you stagnant. He will close doors you were never meant to walk through. He will unsettle you in places you thought you would stay forever. He will expose the cracks in your character so you can strengthen what's weak. He will reveal the truth about the environments you tolerated so you can stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were too small for your purpose. Sometimes the next version of you is hiding behind a yes you've been afraid to give. Sometimes she's behind a boundary you've been afraid to set. Sometimes she's behind a dream you've been afraid to chase. Sometimes she's behind a conversation you've been avoiding. Sometimes she's behind a habit you've been unwilling to break. God is calling you into a season where you no longer fear evolving. Who you are becoming demands courage. Courage to say no. Courage to let go. Courage to trust again. Courage to rebuild. Courage to invest in yourself. Courage to start over. Courage to be seen differently. Courage to be misunderstood. Courage to walk alone for a season. Courage to stand in rooms where no one knows your history, only your potential. The next version of you honors the calling more than the comfort. She understands that elevation is lonely, that obedience is costly, that healing requires honesty, that purpose requires pruning, that destiny demands decisions that the old you would have run from. But hear me, you will never accidentally evolve. You will never stumble into your next level. You must choose it. You must walk toward it even when it terrifies you. You must say yes to the part of you that God is awakening, not the part you outgrew. You're going to have moments where you feel the old you trying to pull you back into patterns that feel familiar. The old you will whisper reminders of your failures. She will replay the moments where you fell short. She will bring up the mistakes you made. She will try to convince you that growth is too risky, too uncertain, too uncomfortable. And if you're not careful, you will confuse familiarity with safety. But the unfamiliar is where transformation happens. The unknown is where faith develops. The stretch is where strength is built. The discomfort is where identity shifts. The next version of you is not hiding. She is waiting for permission to emerge. Waiting for you to stop negotiating with your past. Waiting for you to release what's been weighing you down. Waiting for you to stop running back to what broke you. Waiting for you to stop choosing the lesser version of yourself because you're afraid of your own greatness. And let's be real. Some of us are not afraid of failure. We're afraid of becoming everything God said we could be. Because becoming her means responsibility. Becoming her means intentionality. Becoming her means you can no longer blame the world for the places you refuse to grow. Becoming her means you can no longer hide your light behind insecurity. Becoming her means stepping fully into the identity God designed for you. Before fear ever tried to rewrite your story, there will be days when you feel the tug of war between who you were and who you are becoming. And that tension is holy. That tension is sacred. That tension is proof that God is working on you. He is expanding you, stretching you, refining you, shaping you. The breaking, the shifting, the discomfort, it's all a sign that the old version of you is being shed so the new one can step forward. The next version of you is disciplined. She is focused. She is spiritually sharp. She is emotionally healed. She is mentally fortified. She is anchored in truth. She is aligned with God's voice. She walks with intention. She speaks with authority. She lives with purpose. And she rises with resilience that cannot be shaken by storms she has already survived. You won't meet that version of yourself by staying where you are. You meet her by moving, by choosing, by stepping, by surrendering. By trusting that if God is calling you into a new season, He has already equipped the future version of you to handle what the present version of you fears. There is a version of you that exists beyond the barrier of your comfort. A version that is not defined by wounds but by wisdom, not shaped by fear but by faith, not pulled by the past but propelled by purpose, not controlled by insecurity but commanded by identity. And she is waiting on the other side of the decisions you've been hesitating to make. And as the final echoes of her journey settle into silence, the truth becomes unmistakable. Everything she walked through, everything she fought, everything that tried to break her was never meant to destroy her. It was shaping her, carving her, refining her into the woman she stands as now. The betrayals that once stung like open wounds no longer hold power. They have become lessons etched into her spirit. The voices that mocked her, doubted her, or dismissed her strength now fade into the background like distant noise she no longer needs to notice. Because she has risen past all of it, not quietly, not timidly, but with the kind of authority that only someone who has met their deepest darkness and still chosen to rise can carry. This entire journey was never about revenge for her. It was about restoration. It was about reclaiming the pieces of herself that she allowed the world to fracture. It was about stepping back into her identity with clarity, with conviction, with the unshakable understanding that she doesn't need permission to be powerful. She doesn't need validation to be whole. She doesn't need applause to be worthy. For the first time in her life, she finally sees herself with the same clarity that her pain once tried to blind her from. And that is the real victory. She walks forward now with a steadiness that comes from knowing exactly who she is. She is not defined by what happened to her. She is not limited by the ones who underestimated her. She is not bound by the expectations that once suffocated her. She is the author of her own story, the keeper of her own peace, the guardian of her own destiny. No one else holds the pen anymore. No one else shapes the path she walks. The power is hers now, and she carries it with grace, with resilience, with a quiet fire that doesn't need to shout to be felt. In the end, her greatest revenge is not anger, not destruction, not proving anyone wrong. Her greatest revenge is rising into the life they swore she would never have. A life built on purpose, on clarity, on freedom. A life where she no longer chases love but embodies it. A life where she no longer breaks for others but stands firmly in her own strength. A life where she is no longer the wounded character in someone else's narrative, but the triumphant heroine of her own. Her journey does not end here. It begins because the woman she has become, the woman forged in fire, lifted by faith, strengthened through storms, is unstoppable. And now the world will finally see who she was always meant to be.